So this week, before I actually begin the sermon, I'm going to tell you where we're going first. I'm going to tell you what we're trying to accomplish. There's a story of Jesus that he is, they have arrested him, and it's part of the Passion narrative, and they bring Jesus before Caiaphas the high priest. And they have a little conversation. And in that conversation, Caiaphas suddenly freaks out and rips all of his clothes like Hulk Hogan in the 80s, right? And they rips it open, and he's like, can't you understand that he's speaking blasphemy? That's where we're getting. Because have you ever thought that story was weird? Because have you ever, it's a rare time when I've been talking to someone and I say something and then suddenly they, in anguish, just rip their clothes. It's like, I can't believe you just said that. That's a large reaction, right? And in my history and understanding of scriptures, I've always thought that was a weird thing, that suddenly the high priest, the Pope of his day, suddenly was so upset that he felt the need to rip his clothes and yell. I don't know if you know the story that I'm talking about, but you probably felt the same way if you do know it. That's an odd reaction. Today we're going to talk about why that reaction isn't odd. That it's actually fully in line with what he should be doing, because there are accusations being lobbed at him which are large, to say the least. All right? So we're getting there. Hopefully I've piqued some of your interest. Probably not, but that's all right. So today, Daniel chapter 7, it's a dream of Daniel. Have you ever woken up and had a scary dream? It's like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on with that dream. I've had quite a few over my years. I tend to be a dreamer and all that stuff. And I've had these scary dreams, and it's tough. And Daniel awakes from a scary dream, and the first thing he sees is 4 beasts coming out of the sea. Now remember what we've said before. You got to understand, we got to build here. We got to remember, what does the sea mean? That's where the bad things come from. That's where the bad stuff comes from. So in his dream, these 4 beasts are coming out of the sea. Now, what is a beast? Your dog is a beast. And I know little Muffin, who you took to PetSmart and had it trimmed up. You're like, Muffin's not a beast. Muffin's a beast, right? Because anything that's not human is a beast. Like the cows, the donkeys, all that stuff. Those are all beasts. Even your cat, Felix, or whatever his name is. That's even, Coley and I have had quite a few hamsters over the years, and even Biscuit the hamster was a no good beast, right? That's what beast is, just something that, according to the Bible, is lower than human, right? And so when you are lowering your humanity down, you are acting like a beast. That's the point here. So out of the no good, bad sea comes these subhuman things. And the first one looks like a lion. The next one looks like a bear. The next one looks like a leopard. And all that stuff. Both the lion and the leopard both have wings. What a terrifying image, right? Can you imagine these winged flying predator cats everywhere? You were scared of Sharknado, but now you have the winged things. Sci-fi should really pick up on that, right? They have these winged things. You guys don't even know what Sharknado is, do you? Oh, it's awful. It was made for TV on Sci-Fi at that. And it was kind of a big thing. I think they have 8 of them now. There's 8 Sharknadoes over there. The basic premise is a tornado picks up a bunch of sharks and rain terror on a coastal area, right? So that's over there. But imagine these tigers and leopards with wings flying around. It would be pretty terrifying. And to sum it all up, you have the 4th mecha beast. The fourth, it's like Mega Godzilla. It's like the worst Godzilla, the biggest one. And it says it's described with having all these horns that are out in front of it. This one kind of looks like a Triceratops. There's all these weird art for all this stuff on the internet. And this one kind of looks like a Triceratops. But I really like the ones that it makes it look like makes it look like Leviathan, like this like nasty, horrible sea beast with horns all coming out of its face. And that it's coming up. In other words, indescribable fear of something just nasty coming up. Have you ever had a dream like that? No? Some of you are like, yes. Last night. Someone in the back's like, right now. like that. That's like, all right. Like, I don't know if I appreciate that at all. But like that's like, it's a strange vision. You know, like it's weird, it's wild. But the beast, you got to remember what we've been talking about in Daniel. Daniel is all about the image of God. The image of God. And what is the image of God? It's me. It's you. And it's not something that you earn into, that no, now that I've gotten my campfire badge, you know, I'm now the image of God, right? Like, no, it's something that you are innate and born with. It's your Adamness. It's your humanness, right? It's how you were born. It's part of humanity. Right? You are born into it. And the problem is that we're seeing is that there are great powers like King Nebuchadnezzar in the story that is trying to diminish the image of God in other people, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel himself. Remember how that King Nebuchadnezzar built this huge statue to his own power. And he says, whenever you hear the great and glorious, beautiful music playing, you are to reverential yourself and face towards that image and reverence yourself towards it. Right? Remember that? And if you don't do that, we're going to throw you in the fiery furnace. Like he's like, my image matters more than yours. He's lowering the other people's image. And the Bible says that when we lower the image of other folks, we begin to lower the image of ourselves. And it's all these stories that we see where Nebuchadnezzar, the King Nebuchadnezzar, is lowering the image of other people, and he begins to lower the image of himself, where his heart, you know, what we would call it, is like the heart of a beast. And what we end up seeing is that he then, his outward appearance begins to conform to what has already happened on the inside, and he goes out and he lives like a beast covered by the dew outside. And it says his hair becomes like eagle's feathers, which is weird. And that his nails become like talons. That he becomes no better than a beast of the field, because he has spent his entire existence lowering everyone else, that he has actually lowered himself. This is what this is about. It's about the image of God. And so now in Daniel 7, we see these four beasts, subhuman, right? Coming out of the scary water. And what was the first beast? Do you remember what the first beast was? Is a lion. What was the last story that we just went over in Daniel? The lion's den. That's maybe this stuff is all connected. I don't know. Like that's definitely part of it there. So what you see is that it's about this subhuman or this beastly nature of things, right? So, and here's our first big point that I want you to get. What this is about, it's about the powers of the world coming. And it's the beastly nature of these kings and empires are attacking God's people. That's what he's seeing in the vision, is that the beastly nature of all of these things are attacking God's people. And yes, you can go to the easy things. There are four beasts here, right? You have the lion, you have the bear, you have the leopard, and then you have the big sea beast thing that's super terrible with 10 horns in the back. And people often go, well, that is Babylon, Persia, Greek, Alexander the Great. And then Greek and then Rome, like all that stuff. And we can do that. But I'm going to show you a different way to look at it today, because I kind of had my head blown a little bit earlier today, and it's my job to try to do that to you now. So we got to put on our big boy and girl pants. Here we go. So Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 through 14. So he lists all of these beasts and all these things, and then he lightens the load on us. And he says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man. There came one like the Son of Man, and he came to the Ancient of Days. So the human one, the Son of Man, the human one, came to the Ancient of Days. That sounds like God, right? Okay, good. And was presented before him, and to him was given all power, dominion, glory, and the kingdom, and that all peoples, nations, languages would serve him. And his power, his rule, his dominion was an everlasting rule and dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will stand and never be destroyed. We see this in all the other visions and dreams too. Remember that vision that Nebuchadnezzar had of the big image that started off with gold and went down to clay? And then there was a small stone not carved out by any other human hand, and it hit that and destroyed it. The whole purpose of that was the powers of this world look scary, but it's all just temporary. It's the same thing going on here. The beasts of the world that are coming out of the sea that look so terrifying. Imagine something with just 10 horns coming out of it, coming at you. It's the worst thing. It's like, I can't defeat this. That is all just temporary, because the Son of Man is coming with the Ancient of Days. So if you were Jewish back then, and you saw this passage, what would you think of the Son of Man? You'd probably think that he's the Messiah, right? That's what they understood him to be. They understood him, that Son of Man, to be the one that was going to come to save us. That he'd be the Messiah, that he would be the Christ. Remember, Christ is Messiah in Greek. It's the same word as Messiah. So that he would be the Christ, that he would be the Messiah, that Son of Man. And one like a man, basically from God, would come and establish his earthly kingdom, that is the Messiah. All right, so I hear what you're saying right now. You're like, who cares? This is a cool story, but who cares? Like, what does this have any pertain? Like, this is some dream that some guy has. Yeah, it's in the Bible, so it's important. So I come to church and I listen, and like sometimes you're funny, sometimes you're boring. You know, like that whole thing. Right? But who cares? Well, the reason where this gets super interesting, and I think why we should care, is that Jesus quotes this extensively. Jesus quotes Daniel chapter 7 a lot. And it's not, he doesn't quote like at the beginning of the gospel when everything's so happy. He's like, he's out fishing with his disciples. You guys are going to become fishers of men, and everyone's so great and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, the Son of Man is coming. He doesn't quote it then. He quotes Daniel when things are getting tough. He quotes it when things don't look up anymore, right? He quotes it when he and his disciples are on, and this is from chapter 24, when they are in the Mount of Olives, and he's praying. You know, when he prays and like all that stuff happens to him, and he's praying, and the disciples can't stay awake, and he's giving them this blessing. He says, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Like, he begins to quote Daniel in chapter 24, and it's laying a context for what's going to happen right before Jesus dies. So they arrest Jesus, and they bring him into Jerusalem, and he's welcomed as a king and all of those things, and he's betrayed, and they bring him forward, and they bring him before Caiaphas, the high priest. You guys know Caiaphas, right? Like, this guy was it. He knew scriptures better than anyone that you could ever imagine. Like, he is like the Pope of his day, the high priest. He knew the prophet Daniel like the back of his own hand. Like, he knew everything that was going on in the scriptures. No one would know more than the high priest, right? Like, this guy was it. Jesus wasn't going to teach him much about the scriptures, right? Like, if anything, maybe he could teach Jesus something. At least that's how he feels. Right? He knows all the scriptures, and all the priests report to him. And he knows the prophet Daniel. So let's go forward and see what happens here. Matthew 26. You're welcome to look at it if you want to. Matthew 26, 63, near the end of it. And he's in front of the high priest, and Jesus remains silent. And the high priest said to him, I'm asking you, I adjure you, by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Like, he's been trying to capture Jesus for a long time, but it's kind of this last thing. And I think this is an honest question here. He's asking, like, come on, swear to me now that tell me if you are actually the Messiah, the one that we've been coming to wait for. Are you really God's son? Are you really that person? And let's see how Jesus responds. He responds by saying, you've said so. He never gives him a clear answer, Like, you've said so, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. Remember that Son of Man phrase, right? So he goes, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. And everyone's right now is going, I feel like I should get this, but I'm not right now. I'm confused. But that's okay. Because right after this, the high priest then tore his robes and said, yeah, he's uttered blasphemy. What further witness do you need? You have now heard this blasphemy. What's your judgment? And they all said, he deserves death. Now, hold on. What did Jesus say? He goes, you've said so, but I tell you now that you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming from the clouds of heaven. Who cares? This seems like an overreaction, does it not? All right, let's see if we can explain this a little bit. Let's see if we can get this. Because hopefully I can make you see that that's not an overreaction. Anyone here ever been to a Star Wars convention? I know that's a high nerd thing to do, but everyone been to no one? This kind of looks like a high Star Wars convention like crowd, right? Nobody? So if I was at a Star Wars convention and I dressed myself in all black, and I walked in there, and I had like a black mask on, and I had a little like plastic red sword thing, over there. And I went over there with a deep voice and said, I am your father. Who was I? Who am I impersonating? You guys haven't even been to a Star Wars convention, and you know that, right? That's like you just know. There's no context. It's all I have to do. I didn't even have to wear the black robe or anything. All I'd have to do is say, I am your father. And you're like, Darth Vader, right? You just know that because it's so ingrained in your cultural lexicon that it's just part of it. It's part of who you are. It's part of what you know. What I'm trying to tell you is that everyone back then would have known Daniel to the same extent. They would have known what's going on. They would have seen what's happening. And when Jesus quotes just that little bit, they would have known exactly what he's talking about. Because this is what's going on. Caiaphas knows that story of Daniel. He knows what's happening. He knows the scriptures, and he knows what the Son of Man is actually here to do. That the Son of Man is to destroy that super that 10-horned super mega beast that he is here to destroy there. And when Jesus quotes Daniel, who is Jesus calling Caiaphas? He's calling Caiaphas the super beast, the fourth beast. He's saying, you are the one that has come to destroy the people, that you are leading them astray, that you are the one that's doing all of this, that you are that Caiaphas. And Caiaphas realizes that Jesus is calling him the super mega beast, all of that, and he's like, what? Like, I am the best servant here. And he rips his robe because Jesus is pulling down to his very nature. Because what he's actually quoting is Daniel chapter 7 up here, if I get to it in a second. Here we go. So here's Daniel 7. This is what Jesus is quoting. He shall speak the words against the Most High. All right, let me set this up. The super horned mega beast, all right, is coming out of the sea. He's coming over there. That he is looking like this unstoppable king that no one could ever conquer him. And that beast shall speak words against God, against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, that God's people, that he will drive God's people, and he shall think to change the times and the law. That most mecha beast that's scary, what he's doing is he's trying to wear out the saints of the Most High, and they are trying to change the times and the law. What does that mean? We talked to this extensively at Sunday school. You should come to Sunday school. It's a good time. We shall think to change the times and the law. What's the law? It's not the 10 Commandments. It's part of it. But the laws are like, we think laws are like, oh, dang, I got a speeding ticket. I broke the law. Like, no. The law to the people, to God's people back then was the Torah. The law is the story of creation. The law is the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. The story of Moses, the story of God's people leaving Egypt, the story of them wandering around in the wilderness, getting the 10 Commandments, getting all those laws. That is the law there. And he's saying that this super mega beast is wanting to change all time and laws. He was wanting to change what is truth. What is Jesus' biggest complaint with the Pharisees? That they keep on bringing burden over the people. That even though they know the law and the truth, but they keep twisting the truth, and they keep bringing the burdens on the people of God, and they keep changing and creating all these laws, not to bring people closer to God, but to expound their own power. Right? And Caiaphas probably knows this. And he knows this because it says this, so they will change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, into that terrible beast's hand, that you will have dominion over them for a time, and half a time. But when that happens, when you finally pervert the law enough that you're willing to kill someone on false charges that was completely innocent, what did they do to Jesus? Kill him on false charges for being completely innocent. When you've finally done that enough, then the court shall sit in judgment. God's court will sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end. As soon as Jesus goes, you are that super mega beast, and they all decide, off with his head, Jesus has got to die, he's got to die, all that stuff. That's when Jesus knew that even though he was innocent and the perfect, only innocent human, that they killed him for nothing. That they had changed the law for their own minds. That they lost all their human nature. That they were the super mega beast themselves. And Jesus knew what was happening, that all the courts were convening. All the courts were convening, and they will sit in judgment, and Christ's dominion, and the beast's dominion will be taken away to be consumed and destroyed. And he knows that when that happens, Jesus knows that he wins. Even though he's going to the cross, he wins. Do you understand why Caiaphas freaked out when Jesus said the Son of Man is coming? It's because when he said that, he knew what Jesus was saying, that he was the ultimate evil. He's calling the head priest that. Unreal, huh? And then what does the head priest do? Kills him. Kills the innocent one. Here's the problem that I see. Is that I oftentimes have adjusted the truth to fit my own ends. I have adjusted the truth so that I could gain power and prestige from it. And I know you have too. And when we have done that, we've allowed our beastly nature, our subhuman natures, to rule the day. To come from us and cause strife and pain, and we relish in the sea of chaos that we create behind us. But we also know as Christians that we know when we finally do that, that the council comes together, that the courts come together, and it judges that beastly nature of ourselves and destroys it. So that the life within us, the life in the true image of God, may come bursting forth like a flower in the springtime. That we may burst out of the ground much like Jesus is coming out of the tomb. That we can burst forth and have that new life. That when we finally had enough of it, that Jesus comes forth and saves us. And I think that's good news. That's good news for us all. And it sets my heart at ease. Because the Son of Man, Jesus, has established an everlasting kingdom that has no end. And we'll end right